Hello, dear members of the Drama of Life family. Today we are going to bring you a romantic love story. So let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. The afternoon breeze blew gently through the half-opened window, swaying the thin faded curtains in the small apartment on the sixth floor of an old building. The late afternoon sunlight reflected on the mottled, peeling walls, creating streaks of yellow that were more gloomy than warm. In the living room, which was just big enough to accommodate a set of old chairs and a scratched wooden table, Elena Carter sat quietly on the edge of the chair, holding the phone to her ear, her body as still as a statue. The 28-year-old had light brown hair tied back, a few strands falling to partially cover her thin face. Her face had the quiet beauty, the delicate features of someone who had once held much hope, but time and adversity had taken away its brilliance. Her sad brown eyes were fixed on an invisible spot on the floor, as if she looked away, she would break down. "We are sorry, but if the full medical bill is not paid by the end of this week, we will be forced to suspend Mr. Carter's treatment. This is the policy." The woman on the other end of the line was flat, without hostility or pity, as if she were reading from a pre-recorded program. Elena didn't blame her. She knew they were just doing their jobs, but her heart was breaking. The phone went dead. The screen went black. Elena still held the phone in her hand, her knuckles white from holding it so tightly. The ticking of the wall clock echoed clearly in the silence, emphasizing every moment of helplessness she was experiencing. Her father, Michael Carter, was a high school literature teacher. He was a gentle man who believed in goodness and that if you live a good life, life will not be unfair to you. But then he collapsed after his last class, diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. There was only one glimmer of hope: new treatments at a private hospital where each day of hospitalization cost more than a month's salary for a researcher like Elena. Elena had been working nonstop for the past 6 months. She had taken on 2 jobs, a day job at a biomedical research center, an online tutoring job at night. She had sold off her belongings, borrowed money from friends, and even considered signing up for a drug trial. But now all their resources were exhausted. They owed the hospital more than $30,000. The city at night is a picture of contrast. While Elena struggles with the worries of food and clothing and mounting medical bills, on the other side, the high-rise lights are still shining brightly, illuminating every detail of the world she has never touched. Jonathan Kingsley, the man every financial magazine has mentioned as a symbol of the new generation of successful entrepreneurs, stood by the giant glass wall of his 38th floor office. He crossed his arms, his cold gaze fixed on the distance, where the headlights of the cars streamed like an endless stream of light through the heart of the city. His perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit accentuated his tall figure, his demeanor so composed that there was barely a hint of emotion. Inside, the space was quiet. The ceiling light emitted a soft but cold light, making everything even more emotionless. A thick file was prepared on the ebony table. On the cover, there was only a short line: "Marriage contract, absolute confidentiality." Jonathan is not a believer in love. He grew up in a family where everything was a trade-off. His father was addicted to power. His mother left him for another man because attention was too expensive in this house. He learned to not need anyone and to succeed by being cold and calculating. But now his grandfather, the only person who ever held Jonathan during his cold childhood years, has passed away, leaving behind an unusual will. All the shares in Kingsley Global, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, will be given to Jonathan only if he marries within 6 months and maintains that marriage for at least a year. Not because he wanted him to have love, but because he believed that one could only learn kindness by living for others, even if it was only for a year of pretending. Jonathan wasn't angry, he was just annoyed. It was an unreasonable request, but enough to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build if he refused. So he ordered his assistant to find a woman willing to sign a contract. No romantic demands, no emotional strings attached, just to play the role of wife in public. He needed a deal, nothing more. Elena stared at the contract, her hands shaking as she flipped through the thick pages, covered in legalese as cold as the man sitting across from her. Jonathan Kingsley kept his face uncomfortably calm, his hands clasped together, his elbows resting lightly on the table, as if this were just another routine meeting in his packed schedule. "Do you have any questions?" he asked, his voice low and firm. Elena swallowed. She had a million questions. She wanted to know why a man like him, a multinational businessman, a perfect man who looked like he had stepped off a magazine cover, couldn't find a woman who truly loved him. But she also knew that it wasn't about love. It was about duty. It was about strategy. And he chose her because she had nothing to lose. "Why me?" she blurted out, her voice as hoarse as sand. Jonathan didn't blink. "Because you're smart, discreet, not involved in the media or the upper class. You need money, and I need someone who won't turn this into a love play. This is a transaction, Elena. Nothing more." Elena bit her lip, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "I am not a prostitute." Jonathan raised an eyebrow but didn't scoff. "I'm not buying your body. I'm buying a role." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to read what was behind his icy gaze. But there was nothing. Just a perfect mask, rational, controlled, and strangely lonely. Elena stood up and walked to the office window. Below was the city shining brightly, but inside her was a pitch-black night. The years of hard work studying, the sleepless nights in the lab, the nights she held her father's hand to comfort him through his pain, all seemed to be tested with just a signature. "My grandfather was a conservative man," Jonathan said suddenly. "He left 25% of the Kingsley Group in his will, but with the condition that I marry before I turn 35 and stay married for at least a year. Otherwise, the entire share would go to my cousin, who was just waiting for me to stumble so he could take me over." "You don't believe in real marriage?" she asked without turning around. "I don't believe in negotiable emotions, and I don't have time to gamble." The words made Elena feel sad. Even though the reason she came here was because of her father, a part of her still wished that someone would love her just for her, not because of conditions, not because of circumstances. Jonathan handed her a pen. "You have 3 days to think about it, but if you decide, sign the last line." Elena took the pen. Her fingers glided across the cold table. She saw her father, thin and frail, his eyes pleading for life every time he had a fit. She saw her mother, dead many years ago, always believing that her daughter would change the world with science, not with contracts like this. "I have the means," she said, turning to face Jonathan, her eyes no longer filled with fear. "I need half the money immediately. My father needs surgery this week. The other half, you keep until I finish the year." Jonathan tilted his head. "You are wise." "No, I am desperate," she replied bluntly. "But I am still me. I will not give up my research. I am still working on my PhD in cell biology. I will not give up my ideals, even though I'm about to become the fake wife of a cold-hearted billionaire." Elena accepts on the condition that half of the money be paid immediately to save her father, the rest after completing the contract. She keeps her scientific research work and does not give up her ideals. The wedding took place just 2 weeks later. The media exploded with glowing headlines. "The wedding of the century for Jonathan Kingsley. The last cold-hearted king of Wall Street is married." The photos were so perfect that no one suspected the marriage was fake. Elena walked beside Jonathan, his hand holding hers with just enough force to make the audience believe in the fairy tale they were acting out. But Elena knew. There was a void in his eyes, a cold silence, hidden by a polite smile and a perfectly tailored tuxedo. After the wedding, they moved into a penthouse in Manhattan, a place with glass walls overlooking the entire city. Elena had her own room, and the contract had clear rules. No invasion of privacy, no emotional demands, no interference in personal affairs. Jonathan was a stickler for all of this at first. He left home at 6 a.m. and returned after 9 p.m., always in an unwrinkled suit, and barely spoke more than 10 sentences a day. But then, little by little, the lines began to blur. Elena, exhausted by conferences, research reports, and taking care of her father via video call every night, still fulfilled her role as wife. She appeared at parties with him, laughed, sipped wine, and acted out the couple's harmonious relationship to the point that she herself began to forget it was just a role. At a Kingsley charity event, Elena wore a turquoise dress that Jonathan had picked out. He gave her a long look as she emerged from the dressing room. A strange look, as if he had never really looked at her before. For the first time, it made her feel awkward. "I didn't think blue suited you," he said softly without his usual sarcastic smile. "I didn't think you knew how to dress," she replied, her heart beating slightly faster. They both laughed, not because it was an act, but because for the first time, they were talking like two real people, not two actors. The evenings became less quiet. Jonathan started eating dinner at home, albeit simple dishes. Elena had known for some time that he disliked coriander, was allergic to peanuts, and preferred oolong tea before bed. One night, while she was up all night preparing for an international scientific conference, Jonathan brought her a cup of coffee. "You'll burn yourself out if you keep working like this," he said, calling her "you" for the first time instead of Miss Carter. Elena looked up, surprised. "I thought you didn't care. I'm investing $5 million. I have a right to be concerned about the health of my product." He smiled slightly, but his eyes were no longer as cold as before. As they pretend to be husband and wife in front of society, true feelings gradually develop between them. Jonathan, who initially only thinks of benefits, begins to reveal cracks in his emotional mask, including the fact that he has a dangerous genetic disease. The parties, the spotlights, the fake hugs gradually turned into real ones. Elena knew she was starting to love this man. So did Jonathan, but old wounds and cold calculation made him suppress his feelings. Jonathan and Elena's fictional marriage becomes more and more real. They appear in public together, have dinner together after parties, smile for the cameras, and gradually they themselves lose the ability to tell what is real and what is an act. Jonathan, a man who had been indifferent to everything but work, began to change. No more late nights coming home, no more quiet dinners alone with expensive whiskey. Instead, he sat across from Elena, asked her about her ongoing research, listened to her worries about her father, and occasionally, silently watched her read a book in the soft yellow light. Elena was no exception to this change. She gradually realized that the man who once made her shiver with his icy eyes was now carefully placing an extra blanket over her when she fell asleep on the sofa. He spoke little, but when he did, each sentence was thoughtful, and gradually touching hands in public no longer made her feel awkward. Sometimes she even took the initiative to hold his hand. One night it was raining heavily and the power went out in the penthouse. Elena was about to go downstairs to get some candles when Jonathan called her back and said, "Stay here. I don't want to sit alone." His voice was hoarse, unlike his usual self. She turned around, sat next to him, and for the first time told him about her mother, who had died of a rare disease. Jonathan said nothing, just squeezed her hand gently. That silence, more than any comfort, made Elena want to lean on him, and not because of the contract. But everything started to change after one call. A former colleague from the Boston Medical Research Institute calls Jonathan, by chance, or perhaps on purpose. During the conversation, Jonathan discovers that Elena was once the leader of a research project into the same genetic disease he suffers from. A rare, slowly progressive neurological condition that can't be cured with current treatments. He couldn't believe it. Elena had never said anything. She had come to him, married him, and had been researching his exact illness. He began to wonder, why had she agreed to such a strange contract? Why would a scientist agree to sell herself to a fake marriage? In Jonathan's mind, everything came crashing down. He felt like a guinea pig in Elena's elaborate scheme. Even without proof, the hurt and the trauma of being used made him return to his old self, cold, distant, and distrustful. He called Elena into the library. "You have researched my illness, right?" His voice was low but cold. Elena froze. "Jonathan, I meant to tell you. I just didn't know when the right time would be. But I never. Are you trying to use me to complete your unfinished work? Or to make a name for yourself in the medical world with a vivid case?" He interrupted, his eyes darkening. "No, I never thought like that. I came to you because of my father, and then everything changed. No need to justify." Jonathan turned away coldly. "From now on, just keep the contract. Nothing more. Nothing less." Everything fell apart. Elena could no longer have dinner with him. They lived like two strangers in the same house. Everything that was once warm became painful memories. Jonathan locked himself away, and Elena, even though she knew she was right, could not break down the wall he had just built. Years later, Elena appeared at the hospital with her little daughter Sophie, born from a contract marriage. She had gray eyes just like Jonathan. Elena said nothing, just silently holding her child outside the emergency room. Jonathan happened to be at the hospital for a routine checkup. He was stunned when he saw Elena and the little girl. His instincts told him one thing, and when the truth was confirmed, when he learned that Sophie was his bloodline and needed expensive treatment, his world was shaken again. The Kingsley Group headquarters fell silent as Jonathan confronted his treacherous brother Noah. He was no longer the cold man who had known only power. Now beside him was Elena, the woman who had refused to leave long after their contract ended, and the mother of little Sophie, the light of their lives. When Jonathan presents evidence that Noah once conspired to poison the formula, the very genetic disease he suffers from, the council is stunned. Elena, a researcher, responds with the courage and anger of a mother defending her child. Noah loses his power, and Jonathan, for the first time, reclaims his honor not through wealth, but through love and truth. A few weeks later, the little family lived in a suburban villa. There were no more lies or public appearances. Jonathan took Sophie to school, kissed her forehead every morning, and whispered, "I love you." One sunny afternoon, Jonathan knelt down in the middle of the garden. No longer a contract proposal, but a real proposal. "Elena Carter, will you marry me? No conditions, just love." Elena smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "I was your wife the first time you saw me as a person, not an agreement." True love doesn't need a signature, it needs a choice, every day with all your heart.